Hey everybody, it's just Iron Jaden back here, or Mustaine 1940, or Jaden Taylor, and I'm going to do something that's kind of in respects to what Cover Killer Nation, another reviewer on YouTube, does for band reviews. I'm going to do a musician review on one of the biggest metal of all time, going all the way back to 1969. I'm going to do it on Mr. Ozzy Osbourne of Black Sabbath and his own solo project. Now, I've been doing some recent research on Ozzy Osbourne. I've been getting really back into the No More Tears album, and I decided that if it was between him and a few other artists that I'm really big fans of, that it would have to be Ozzy first, and then if this actually became popular, then I would end up doing an artist review on the other ones later on. Now, we all know Ozzy Osbourne for a few things. We know Ozzy Osbourne for Blizzard of Oz with Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley. We know Ozzy Osbourne for Diary of a Madman with Randy Rhoads. And we know Ozzy Osbourne for his recent work on 13 with Black Sabbath and 1970 to 1978 with Black Sabbath. Ozzy Osbourne is a legend. He's a legend songwriter, he's a legend vocalist, and he's a legend survivor of drugs and alcohol abuse. And the guy rocks. There's not many other, or if any other, rock legends that we can say have the legacy that Ozzy Osbourne has had as possibly the first metal vocalist in the history of music, with fronting Black Sabbath, and then he went on to become an even heavier and faster artist that became even more well known with guys such as Jake Ely on Bark of the Moon, Zakk Wylde on No More Tears, and Randy Rhoads on Diary of a Madman, and Gus G on his most recent 2010 release, Scream. Ozzy Osbourne has worked with tons of musicians over his time since 1970 coming into the music scene. Ozzy Osbourne was born all the way back in 1948, ladies and gentlemen. 64 years old, going on 65 in this coming year. Ozzy Osbourne currently has 10 studio albums with his solo project, and I'm pretty sure he has 7 studio albums with Black Sabbath, if not 6, and he is moving on with Black Sabbath now to the point where he says that they will probably do at least one more album after 13 in the next couple of years if everyone stays healthy and well and the tour goes well, which I assume, based on how well the album was and how well the live production has been so far, we will see another great Black Sabbath album before Black Sabbath retires. Now, if I look over here, I just have the lineups, and we start off, the first lineup was all the way back in 1980. It was the recording of Blizzard of Oz, and that was with Lee Kerslake on drums, Bob Daisley, the ex-Rainbow bassist, and Randy Rhoads from Quiet Riot. Now I'm going to start this off by talking about Randy Rhoads a little bit and saying Randy Rhoads is my favorite guitarist of all time. Randy Rhoads, I really have a lot of respect for. He came from Quiet Riot as a guy that was he really didn't talk on stage or anything. He just played his guitar, and in my opinion, in that time, Randy Rhoads did things with his guitar that he was 10 years ahead. That he was 10 years ahead of with Quiet Riot, and things that he was 5 years ahead of with Ozzy Osbourne, going into Mr. Crowley and Crazy Train and Diary of a Madman and Flying High Again and Believer, and I don't know. Just his solos was so powerful and they dragged you in so easily that I can't say that there's any guitarist that I find more exciting than Randy Rhoads. And Randy Rhoads recorded 2 studio albums with Ozzy Osbourne in 1980 and 1982 for Blizzard of Oz in 1980, which ended up going quadruple platinum in 1997, and Diary of a Madman, which went platinum. Going through these 2 albums, these are my 2 favorite Ozzy Osbourne albums. Okay. Going through these albums, these are my 2 favorite Ozzy Osbourne albums, and I have to say these were the most creative and well-produced albums in my opinion. Now, they come from a time where production value wasn't that good. It came out really well. I mean, Kerslake on drums for Diary of a Madman, and for Blizzard of Oz, I thought he did a really good job. I thought in Diary of a Madman he really showed up, and he really did a good job playing. And then of course you have Bob Daisley and the bass in songs like Believer, and then Crazy Train and songs like that. Songs were just like, it's a poppy little bass riff that could still be useful today in songs that they were written. But those two albums featured so many songs that no one writes anymore, because no one writes great songs like that, like Over the Mountain, Flying High Again, Sail Across the Ocean. Now, that song's actually controversy because there's people that believe there's different meanings to SATO, but I believe it is Sail Across the Ocean the way that the lyrics are sent. So songs like that, just the guitar riffs, the vocals, the lyrics, the bass, the drums, the production, everything about those two albums was great. Then Ozzy Osbourne went on to 1983 with Bob Daisley, Tom Eldridge on drums, and Jake E. Lee, ex-Rat guitarist, and they released Bark at the Moon. Now, I mean, every person knows Let's Play Guitar Hero 1. Every person that's a big Ozzy Osbourne fan knows a few songs. They know Mr. Crowley, they know Crazy Train, they maybe know Let It Die, they know No More Tears, they know Shot in the Dark, they know they know Flying High Again, and then they know Bark at the Moon. Bark at the Moon was just one of those songs where I actually thought the song was very poorly produced. I didn't think it was well produced in the original version, and even so, the guitar work was great. It didn't really live up to Randy Rhoads' guitar work, but Jake E. Lee did a good job of it. And then also the drums were good, but this album, in my opinion, was really low task. Like, it wasn't overall a great album, but I mean, the guitar work was good, and Ozzy was good, and it was an album that people remember, but they remember it mostly for the title track, obviously. And then they went on to do The Ultimate Sin with Phil Sousa on bass and Randy Castillo on drums with Jake E. Lee. And this album I never really listened to, I don't know a lot about, but from what I have listened to off this album, it was a good album, and it had songs on it like Shot in the Dark, and Shot in the Dark is a song that you still hear on the radio a few times a week and whatnot, and it's a pretty big song and people know it, and it's a catchy song, and overall it's not a bad album. It's an Ozzy album, you can listen to it, but it's not something that you choose out of his top 3 albums. The next album was No Rest for the Wicked. This was the introduction in 1987 to Zakk Wylde getting his name made with Ozzy Osbourne. Now, there's a lot of people that remember Zakk Wylde for stuff, and I mean, I didn't really listen to Black Label Society. I know they're good, and I know they're on tour with Megadeth right now in Gigantic, and I've watched some of their videos, and Zakk Wylde's a talented guitarist. There's people that debate Zakk Wylde is better than Randy Rhoads. I, for one, disagree. I believe Randy Rhoads helped make Zakk Wylde's style come about. Zakk Wylde has his own style, he has his own squealing, but if it's not for guys like Dimebag Darrell and Randy Rhoads, I don't think Zakk Wylde would have had the influence on his own guitar playing that he did. Even so, Zakk Wylde's a great guitarist, and I'm proud of him for what he's been doing. And either way, No Rest for the Wicked was another good album by Ozzy Osbourne. Like I said, it's just like Osmosis, it's just like Down to Earth, it's just like The Ultimate Sin. They're just albums that were never really looked at on an extreme basis by Ozzy Osbourne fans, unless you're a big Ozzy Osbourne fan that takes the time to look at all of his works and listen to all of his works. The next album is probably Ozzy Osbourne's third biggest album, or second biggest album, above Diary of a Madman to a lot of people, but I don't think it comes above Blizzard of Oz, just because Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley. But No More Tears in 1991. This album ended up being Ozzy Osbourne's biggest album for commercial sales. It came out and it went 4 times platinum in the first couple of years. And this album, in my opinion, is great. I mean, this album, you go through it, and it has songs like Don't Blame Me, which has the message of people see me on the street and think that I'm satanic, think that I'm a loser, think that I'm a druggie, and that's not really what I am. And that just gets me so much, because I've heard so many people say that the music I listen to is based off of Satan and it's awful, and that's not true at all. And then there's songs like No More Tears. No More Tears is one of my top 5 favorite Ozzy songs. That song rocks, the bass riff going into it, and that's also Bob Daisley and Randy Castillo on drums. And the bass riff is awesome, and that seems like he always had a way, Bob Daisley, of making some catchy bass riffs and make believe and whatnot. He's not the best bassist, but he's made some cool bass riffs to intros and through songs. And other songs on this album. This album actually opens up with another one of my top 10 favorite Ozzy songs. That's Mr. Tinker Train. Starts off with a bit of a creepy thing, and It seems kind of pedophile-ish, the lyrical base, but I mean, whatever, who cares? It's just an Ozzy Osbourne song that people love. It's a good song. It has a sick guitar, and this, in my opinion, was the album that actually did something for Zakk Wylde. This was the album where everyone said Zakk Wylde is a rocking guitarist. He is better than Randy Rhoads. And even though I don't believe that, Zakk Wylde did an amazing job on this album. This might be the best listened through album from beginning to end of an Ozzy album, but I still think Diary of a Madman for me is my favorite Ozzy Osbourne album, as Ozzy Osbourne himself has said as well. Going on through this album, there's also songs like SIN, and it spells out sin, but it actually stands for Shadow in the Night. Shadow in the Night, I'm pretty sure. I don't know if that's speculated, but I'm pretty sure it is. And it also had other songs on the album, like I Don't Want to Change the World, and that song was just another song, had a really cool message in it. And then Party with the Animals, but I'm pretty sure that was a bonus track that was added later. And then there were songs like Mama, I'm Coming Home. Mama, I'm Coming Home reigns to be one of the top 3 songs that I hear on the radio from Ozzy Osbourne, along with Crazy Train, Shot in the Dark, probably. But Mama, I'm Coming Home is a song that I'm not a huge fan of. I mean, like, it's a great song, but I'm not a huge fan of it. But I do feel that it's a song that a lot of people that aren't really big heavy metal fans or aren't big hard rock fans find from Ozzy and say, this is an awesome song, I love it. Like, I've heard it from people that listen to Pop and Green Day and whatnot, so it's pretty cool that Ozzy made a rockin' song like that, but it also fits people that don't really listen to that kind of music. Next up was Osmosis in 1995. I don't know a lot of information on this album. I've looked for this album in stores. I've never been able to find it. I love the album cover, and I haven't really heard much, so I don't have much to say on it, but 1995 was just another album, Osmosis. Going on next, 1996 in October was the first ever Ozfest. Ozfest reigns to be one of the top 5 metal festivals in all of metal to the date. Ozzy handpicks some people to come play. Sometimes he plays in it, sometimes he doesn't, and he gets some people to go play in it. I'm sure Black Sabbath will be there this year, maybe not, but yeah, and Ozfest led Ozzy Osbourne to be the first hard rock musician to reach $50 million made in merchandise, so that's a big feat for Ozzy Osbourne coming off of his own tour. Next up was 2001's Down to Earth. Ozzy Osbourne fans find big controversy in this album with the song Dreamer, because some people say that it's not a rock song, it's not anything Ozzy should have done, it's just a soft song that wasn't something that they were a fan of. But then there's other people like me that think Dreamer is a great song, it fits Ozzy's vocals, and he did a really good job on it. And I thought it was a well done song. I thought the album was really good. I would give the album 3 stars out of 5, or 7.5 stars out of 10 if I were to rate the album. I'm not rating the album though. I'm just rating basically Dreamer right now. I'm just going through Ozzy Osbourne's discography, and I have to say that it was a good album. It wasn't anything people look at a lot, but it was a good album to follow up to be released in the 2000s. And then 6 years later, I came to 2007 when Black Sabbath released that they were going to change their name to Heaven and Hell and continue touring with Tony Iommi and a replacement on bass and Bill Ward. I don't know who the replacement on bass was, I can't remember, but they decided that. And then later on, Ozzy Osbourne released that with Zakk Wylde he would be releasing Black Rain, which reigns to be another one of Ozzy Osbourne's bigger albums. I don't have a lot of research on this album either, but the tour was really big for Black Rain, as it was the first Ozzy Osbourne album in 6 years, and it was a big album, and it came out to 2009 when Ozzy Osbourne teamed up with Gus G to tour for Ozzy Osbourne, and he teamed up with Slash on the Slash and Friends album to release the song Crucify the Dead with Slash on guitar and Ozzy Osbourne on vocals. That song was great. It was a really good song. It kind of brings me back to Rob Zombie and Ozzy Osbourne teaming up back in the 90s on that single that they did together. And then 2010, after it was pushed back a little bit, Scream, the most recent and could be the last Ozzy Osbourne solo project album, are released with Gus G on guitar, Tom Cleefos on bass, on drums, and Blasco on bass. This album was a good album. It had songs like Let It Die on it. It had Soul Sucker, and it had songs like I Love You All, which people thought this might be the end of Ozzy Osbourne. He might be retiring after this because it was only about a minute and a half runtime, but there's a really nice song to listen to. It's just a soft song where Ozzy was just saying he loved everyone, and people thought, oh crap, Ozzy's done. But I'm not really sure what's going on, but I've gotten through the discography. If we talk about Black Sabbath 13 released this year in June 10, I've gotten through the discography. That's 10 studio albums, and that's actually about 17 studio albums that Ozzy's appeared on, and as like a full vocalist. And I have to say, Ozzy Osbourne remains to be one of my idols in music as a musician, because the fact that he's been abusing drugs and alcohol for 40 years, he's been on and off for the past 10 years, he's taken some time to get clean and whatnot, but he's also worked with all these guys. Bassist Geezer Butler, guitarist Tony Iommi, drummer Bill Ward, guitarist Zakk Wylde, guitarist Randy Rhoads, guitarist Jakey Lee, drummer Brad Wilk, guitarist Gus T, guitarist Slash. He did a collaboration with Metallica live during Ozfest. Bassist Blasto, Tommy Clefos on drums, Castillo on drums, Bob Daisley on bass, Aldridge on drums, Chris Lassie on drums, 10 studio albums, and a heck of a lot of guys, and he also did a Christmas song with Mariah Carey. That's rockin'. No, I actually watched that, and it wasn't the best thing ever, but I mean, what are you gonna do? He wants to do what he wants to do, and that's what he comes out and does. Ozzy Osbourne is a legend. He survived everything. He has his own book, Dr. Ozzy. He's been everywhere in media. He had the Osbournes that we all remember as a show where it was supposed to be the average American family, but really it was a bunch of people that were acting like retards when they weren't really retarded. There's a lot of people like my own dad, per se, that think Ozzy Osbourne fakes his speech inability because of the fact that he can still come out and sing, and even live he comes out and sings pretty well. It's not spot on, but for being 64 years old and releasing a new album this year, and to be able to go out and sing it at least 75% of the performance of the studio album, and the band behind him produces the sound perfectly, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Brad Wilk. I have to say that 13, in my opinion, was one of my top 3 favorite Ozzy Osbourne featured albums, along with No More Tears and Diary of a Madman taking the #1 spot. The remastered Diary of a Madman with I Don't Know Live with Randy Rhoads on guitar was probably my favorite Ozzy Osbourne album that's ever been released. And overall, he's released Crazy Train, he's released Blizzard of Oz, he's released Mr. Crowley, he's released War Pigs, he's released Paranoid, he's released Iron Man, he's released Age of Reason, he's released End of the Beginning, God is Dead. He's released it all. He's released hard rock, he's released pop, he's released heavy metal. And even though in an interview Ozzy Osbourne said Black Sabbath wasn't heavy metal, and he doesn't know where that comes off, in my opinion, Black Sabbath is the first heavy metal band, and they came from an influence of Jimmy Page's guitar playing in some of the heavier Led Zeppelin songs. In my opinion, if I were to pick the most legendary metal musician in the history of metal, I'd have to say it would be Ozzy Osbourne, for surviving 40 years of drug abuse, for 35 years of a solo project and Ozfest, and being so commercially successful and coming back and still being able to sing at 64 and release 13 and want to go on to make another album. This guy is a true survivor of metal that people label as satanic, but really belongs to the Church of England and prays before he goes out in every show. He goes out live, he loves the fans. Obviously he loves money, but he loves the fans. I love the guy. I don't care if nobody else loved the guy. I would still love the guy. And millions, or 500 million people around the world know of him, and I guarantee 400 million of those people love him. Ozzy Osbourne, to me, is 9 out of 10 stars as a musician, and he's 10 out of 10 stars when it comes to his heart for his music. And I want you to leave your comments on Ozzy Osbourne in the comment section, and I want you to say what you believe about Ozzy Osbourne. This has been my first band review, and I hope there will be more.